Welcome to the Industrial Control System Information Sharing and Analysis Center's monthly public briefing. We'll take another minute or two to give those who are still logging in a chance to complete the process. During this time, I will provide some housekeeping guidelines. If you're calling in on the phone, you will find a PIN number on the GoToWebinar application. Please enter this PIN into your phone and press pound. This will allow us to manage any background noise. My name is Debbie Wendell, and I will be moderating today's session. I serve as Community Director for the Center and oversee the Center's human-to-human information dissemination mechanisms. In case you are not yet aware of the full range of collaborative products that we have to offer, make sure that you check out our LinkedIn group, Twitter account, and website blog posts. Plus, we hope that you will take full advantage of these briefings, as well as our Thursday open forum discussion sessions. Our goal is to get our members accurate, timely, and actionable information in a way that best suits their needs. Today's briefing, If You Build It, SARA and the Global Knowledge Network, features a panel of distinguished subject matter experts, including Mark Blackmer, Product Marketing Manager for Industry Solutions at SourceFire, and Del Rodias, Senior Manager at Palo Alto Networks. ICS-ISAC Chair Chris Blask will be facilitating today's discussion. During today's presentation, Chris will take the first few minutes to lay out some background information to frame the issue. Then, each panelist will be introduced and have the opportunity to present their opening remarks. Next, the panel will spend about 35 to 40 minutes for their discussion. Finally, there will be time for questions and answers and open discussion at the end of the presentation. At any point during the call, if you would like to ask a question, you may use the hand raise feature in the GoToWebinar application. When speaking, if you would please introduce yourself and indicate your industry affiliation. After the meeting, a recording of this session will be available on the Center's website. So now, without any further delay, Chris, over to you for your background presentation.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thanks to the folks who are here today live and for those of you watching in the future for the time you're putting in following us and all your work in the industry. The conversation that we're going to have today is about the evolution of the knowledge sharing network we're all embedded in. And as has been said often enough, unless you know where you've been, it's hard to know where you are, and it's certainly very difficult to look forward to see where we're going. And it's important to note that people have been very busy in this space for quite some time now. With the NIST cybersecurity framework, so large in people's horizons right now with everything that's going on. The draft is out there. It's being officially published in its first version in the coming weeks. We can look back at the various artifacts that have come along with building the sharing networks that we're seeing emerging around us. The ISO 99 system, the North American Electric Reliability Council, and the SIP standards that have been out there. American Water Works Association published a roadmap to secure water in 2008, and is just now putting out a very interesting cybersecurity guidance document for the 50 to 100,000 water systems in the United States to work with. So we've been coming a long way. This cybersecurity framework is worth mentioning because, again, because it's on our mind so much. One of the good analogies for this particular framework has been the physician's desk reference. This is the sort of Uber document that relates to all the other standards and various other components that we have. So what all this leads to is the Global Knowledge Network mentioned in the title of this particular talk. This is based on the idea that the individual facilities, whether it be chemical or manufacturing, power, transportation, oil and gas, each themselves have to have the capabilities to be aware of themselves, to have knowledge of themselves. We have a lot to build on with this, decades and in fact, in many cases, centuries of expertise in developing awareness of the process itself. This maps very well into the information systems that are being used to manage these systems today. And in fact, we have service providers that are working with these facilities already. They're getting data and information, the raw atomic data, information that you can look at like syslog messages, MAC addresses, IP addresses, system configurations as data, the information being the conglomeration of all that data into the operational information that these facilities need to function on a moment-by-moment basis. This has already put the service providers and the integrators and the outsourced operation organizations in the position to be able to see what's going on, not just at one facility, but at multiple facilities. And this has led to the obvious need to continue this evolution. And we see artifacts like the private centers, like the ISAC that have begun to emerge since 1998. Industry organizations have been around in most cases much longer. Public centers like the ICS CERT, which has been around since 2008. State fusion centers, municipal operation centers, and so forth. And all these organizations have been working through in the last number of years how to define and share knowledge. And this is why we speak about knowledge networks as opposed to information networks. It may be in many cases that facilities and their partners can only share some of the information about the information they have. And that's perfectly fine. You know, we outside in the extra facility world have a need, not in every case to know specifically what's going on at an individual facility, but we do very much have a need to know that, for example, an attack has been seen at 3 water facilities in different geographies in the United States, and it's also been seen in transportation, and it's also been seen in manufacturing. So we've made a lot of progress down that path. So SARA, the Situational Awareness Reference Architecture, is a project that's been undertaken by the ICS ISAC and our membership, including our 2 distinguished panelists and others in the vendor integrator space and subject matter space. And it specifically consists of 3 artifacts. The SARA guide, which we published in draft format in this quarter, which is compared to that physician's desk reference analysis, which is a great thing to have if you're a doctor. SARA is meant more to be the pamphlet that a doctor gives to you to take home, to do specifically these things, and so that any type of facility can use open source tools or commercial tools and services to establish the awareness they need of their own systems and be able to consume information from the outside world and hopefully share some of that information, some of that knowledge with the rest of it. The SARA server, which is the Linux distribution being developed with open source tools like Snort, which is maintained by, of course, SourceFire, Tripwire, Wisdom, other tools like that. ActiveMQ we'll talk about in just a little bit. The SARA server will be available for download for free by any facilities, any organizations, so that they can have some footprint on their internal network, on the control system network, that gives them the basic visibility and provides a landing spot and hooks for commercial implementations to be involved in a contiguous network. And then the SARA network itself, which is, of course, the relationship of sharing between the entities like the ICS ISAC and our membership, Palo Alto, Cisco, individual facilities, other sharing centers. So with SARA, we frame situational awareness as these 4 basic components, that every facility should know who they are. You can look at this in the process perspective, like an assessment. Every facility should know that they are, for example, a wastewater facility in rural Dandridge, Tennessee, that they've got these basic assets, these basic capabilities, these basic threats, these basic risks. Without an awareness identity, as those of us who work in information security or industrial control systems know, what we do is that we end up working on targets of opportunity. We fix this, install that, without having the broader vision. Every facility should know their inventory. So what devices do I actually have? Again, this is an artifact that we see a great deal in the asset owner space, where organizations like ICS CERT are doing great work putting out vulnerabilities, making that information available. But if facilities don't know that they actually have devices impacted by those vulnerabilities, again, not even Batman can save them. Every facility should know what the activity of their control system is. And this is particularly valuable in the industrial space, much more so than in the IT space, where this sort of work has made great strides in the last decade. Industrial control system networks are deterministic entities that have fixed assets that speak to each other in fixed ways. Every facility should know what that is, in the same way as they know exactly what's going on in their physical process. And finally, sharing. And it's worth taking a moment to talk about this. Information sharing has been a really contentious issue over the last couple of years. Obviously, we know that individual facilities have their own needs for safety and reliability in their constituents. There's concerns about liability and regulation. So when we talk about sharing, we mean that every facility should be able to find information in the outside world. They should be able to bring that information in, and they should be able to apply it to their own context. And all of this should happen in real time through automated means. So with SARA in this first stage, what we've done is created a initial pilot that's based on a few individual nodes, the ICSI SAC, another sharing center, Energy Sec, another private center in focusing on the electric sector, and the Internext Lab and various of our partners, including some of the folks on the phone and others. Inside the Internext Lab, it's a smart grid setup, so there's electric transmission, distribution, smart meters, AMI, and home network, and setup. And we've been working with open source and commercial tools to place them into this lab and demonstrate different use cases that can apply to asset owners in the real world. Working with clients, with members in different spaces, like, for example, Leidos, which is a new company that's come out of SAIC. It provides outsourced SOC as representative of a lot of the other individuals, organizations in the space, and working with asset owners to expand the use cases. So throughout 2014, we'll continue this exercise of modeling different architectures, modeling different use cases, so that each of the partners in the ecosystem of sharing that we need to protect our local, our national, and international information systems has a reference model they can work against. So with all of that as a background, I'd like to open up the conversation, as Debbie said earlier on, get some initial comments from Mark and Val. And then while we're doing this, everybody can provide questions if they'd like to, and we'll have the conversation following that. So Debbie, if you'd like to take the conch back for a moment and introduce Mark, so he can say his 2 bits, that would be lovely.
Mark Blackmer's career and experience build on his early work as a technician and engineer. He quickly capitalized on his first-hand experience to rise to prominence at ArcSite, now part of HP, where he functioned as principal sales engineer for several divisions, including strategic accounts, Eastern U.S., and the U.S., Canada, Latin American division. He is currently Senior Product Marketing Manager for Industry Solutions at SourceFire. Chris, back to you.
Mark, if you'd like to take a few minutes and provide some of your thoughts and comments to feed the conversation, the floor is all yours.
Oh, great. Thank you. You said 2 bits. Can I have 3 bits? I'm sorry.
3 at least.
No, obviously we've talked about this a lot, and even last week there's a lot of discussion on knowledge sharing. And it was a while back I had read an article in Wired, and it talked about a new respiratory disease that was around called MERS, M-E-R-S, and it drew a parallel with SARS. And the reason I bring those up, what I thought was interesting about those, is the fact that when there's an epidemic, a health epidemic, there are certain protocols and procedures that nations follow. And in the case with SARS, what had happened was the country of origin said, no, everything's fine. And what had happened is the disease propagated and killed about 10% of the people that it infected. And so it's very easy to see, from a health perspective, why knowledge sharing is good. And we saw a real example of how not sharing knowledge had very adverse results. And so I'm a firm believer in that from a security perspective. And it's interesting that this same view isn't taken within the cybersecurity community. I mean, there are those of us that are on the call obviously feel very, very strongly about it. But, I know we all run into resistance when we're out there, whether it's as a vendor or even within our own organizations. But I think the work that we're looking at with SARA is important for a number of reasons. Number one, where you're talking about putting together the SARA server. I mean, there's a big talent acquisition and retention problem in our space. So being able to provide something that is, some of the tools and techniques in order to help secure ICS environments, but also being able to package it up in this way, I think, is very valuable. So when working with projects like SARA, being able to put it into a digestible format, a deployable format. I mean, and I think that's a big thing too, is the fact that this is something usable out of the gate. Has been very appealing, and I think the time has come. So this work that you're doing there is very exciting. We're just very glad to be a part of it, a part of the conversation. So those are my 2 to 3 bits.
Thank you very much. Debbie, if you would like to say some kind words about Del so he can launch into his initial thoughts, that would be lovely as well.
Del Rodriguez is a senior manager at Palo Alto Networks with specialization in cybersecurity for industrial control systems found in critical infrastructure sectors such as energy, transportation, and manufacturing. He is a seasoned technology industry veteran with more than 17 years experience spanning security, networking, aerospace defense, and semiconductors. Prior to Palo Alto Networks, Del held a variety of leadership roles in strategic and product marketing, business operations, and engineering. He holds both his MSEE and BSEE degrees as well as an MBA. Chris, back to you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. And since we gave Mark 3 bits, we have to give you at least 3 yourself. So if you can offer some initial comment.
The generosity there. Yeah, so equally as excited to be part of the SARA efforts. For those that don't know Palo Alto Networks, I'll start there. A company based in Santa Clara, California, recognized leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for enterprise firewalls. We're known for our play in the enterprise space, application security, but we're also being deployed now into the energy and other critical infrastructures. People who have started using us in enterprise are pivoting, realizing that, hey, a lot of the same benefits in enterprise could be used inside the OT as well. So in case you don't know us, we just want to let you know that we are actually in SCADA today. The things that typically we get called in for discussions are you get into the, what do you guys have for APTs, what do you guys have for NERC? But actually the thing that comes up the most is, what can you do to help me increase my situational awareness? I have this OT environment. I know it's supposed to have a limited set of applications. Only certain users are supposed to be using it. If there's direct connectivity to the web, it's very controlled. So I just needed some way to kind of validate that. So the first 2 parts of the acronym SARA is what I'm fairly interested in. That situational awareness is kind of educating the community as far as what kind of information could be possible with the new technology available, for example, from Palo Alto Networks, SourceFire, whoever other vendors are participating in the SARA framework. So I'm really excited about that piece. The information sharing is part of it as well. The challenges I see are, number 1 is around segmentation. I mean, there's great practices being prescribed by the likes of organizations, ISA 99, IEC 62443, for example. So kind of talking about the use cases there, Chris, kind of looking at where it may make sense to have a level of granularity in terms of situational awareness or visibility. The other aspect is how to make the different pieces work together. Oftentimes see a lot of different appliances in these environments, in the OT environment. So there's siloed pieces of information. How do you make these silos of information work together better? And finally, just in general, like I said, awareness of what's possible. I kind of look forward to helping create some educational material or webinars such as this, outreach to share, what, again, how situational awareness could be improved and information could be shared. So yeah, definitely excited about participating here.
Thanks for that, both of you guys. And I want to key on some of the things you were saying, and that both of you made interesting points that speak to all of this. Del, you're talking about the siloing information, and Mark, you're referencing the S4 conference that Dale Peterson and Digital Bond held last week in Miami, and have been holding for a number of years now. And I know from maybe over-repeated, but it needs to be said, everybody involved in this, from our perspective, has been doing fantastic work all along. I don't think there's an individual or organization we've run into that isn't fully vested in this, but it's putting all these pieces together. So a comment that I've heard coming out of S4 was, we wasted a decade. And I think that's not entirely correct. I think it's taken us this long to get where we are. And what we've been trying to do, all of us in our various hats, what NIST has been trying to do with the cybersecurity framework, what everything under DHS has been doing, under central leadership of Sean McGurk in 2008, and creation of ICS Certificate, Idaho National Labs, and so forth, have been building the components we need to pull together to do all of this. So I think what we're seeing at this point is that a lot of the information, a lot of the knowledge, a lot of capabilities exist. The vulnerability information that Dale and the folks at Digital Bot and so forth have done in other researches, what's being done in the public space with ICS Cert and others, is an enormous step forward. I understand the frustration, that not everybody is paying attention to this. But like anything complex, we have to have the pipes in place. There has to be someone capable of receiving it on the other end. So it's SARA obviously is a project we're involved in. We're highly vested in and we want to see it successful. But it's really more just a demonstration and exercise in these last pieces of putting things together. So it's interested in either of your thoughts or questions from the audiences here live in the challenges, the roadblocks, the opportunities you're seeing, in connecting the silos. Dell, you're talking about Palo Alto networks, and as you know, we've discussed, and we're looking forward to exercising in this context. There's specific functionality that your products bring to looking at role-based, access and so forth, the situational awareness of access and control systems. Each of these things, connect to all the other components. What SourceFire, and now the acquisition by Cisco, the capabilities that brings, and it's, and the ability. And these are really exciting times, right? We each as individuals have out-of-scale ability to make a difference. Both of you as individuals, since I know you, I know the organizations you're working in, there's enormous cloud into all this. And everywhere we look, just to throw out my own comment on the artifacts, as recently as last week, that we're seeing rise up to tie into all this. I know one of the folks that I see in the attendees, Boxguard Solutions, has won a grant from the Department of Energy to work on patch management. And while we're talking here, I may fiddle this into this diagram, but the issue of patch management and industrial control systems has been something tied into everything people like Dale, for example, are talking about, giving this information out and how do we use it. And if we're correct, if all of this is emerging at the same time, then you should be able to look around and see artifacts like this. Patch management and ICS systems is very complicated. We all know the roadblocks to that with the 7.4 AIC instead of CIA, for example. And lo and behold, there is a group that's now been charged by one of us, in this case the federal government, Department of Energy, with working on a solution that really should plug right into that. If we have some repository where patches tend to be, then that can plug into a system like SARA, where asset owners have gone through the process of the identity and inventory portion, who they are, what's important to them, that this particular device is more important than that particular device. In the identity portion, in the inventory portion, that this particular device is a vendor A, model B, version C device. So Mark, you're never too short of words. So in your view, what are some of the artifacts that you've seen, perhaps in the last couple of quarters of last year, where you've seen the connectivity and the coming together of efforts here in the U.S., internationally, actively in process, that strike you as indicators that the pieces are coming together?
Yeah, I mean, I think, oddly enough, I did have a few words about that. It's just so in the last year, that we've known each other, just the changes are going on. I mean, one of the things, you and I have had this discussion about is that we're kind of at a new frontier. So in essence, what that means is you have a lot of people with a lot of different ideas trying to do a lot of different things. And there's still quite a bit out there, and that's not a bad thing. That means there's a lot of different perspectives. So again, coming out of S4, just some of the debate, and there was no shortage of debate last week on some of the best ways to go. So, but what you are seeing is, when I go to these different events or have these conversations, I'm seeing some of the same faces, or a lot of the same faces. So, there's a lot of us that are concerned and making efforts to move forward. So you're seeing just in the progress, like I've seen with the ISAC here over the last year. But you had mentioned too challenges, roadblocks, and opportunities, and I think some of the challenges that I'm seeing, is there's an expectation that we have to be perfect, and what it really comes down to, and I've seen that in some of the conversations I've had with people or other debates, and just in security as a whole, I think coming from the IT side of it, for the most part, most people understand that you just can't be perfect, and which seems completely counterintuitive because the bad guys only need to be right once. We just need to make one mistake or leave one hole open, but that's just the reality of it. So even having that conversation to understand that, I see as a challenge. People want to make it perfect because there's a lot at stake. I mean, the outcomes can be pretty horrendous if we fail. But again, going back to another conversation you and I had, our reality, the one in which we live, is a messy reality. So, I've heard things where, well, if developers just did what they were supposed to do, sure, I'll buy that argument, but I'm not going to hold my breath till, that's going to happen right away. And it's nothing against developers. Again, it's just the reality, whatever pressures they're under. So, some of those challenges is just getting the mind wrapped around the reality of where we are. It's messy, but we need to be doing something. I do see a lot of concerted effort there. You mentioned roadblocks. I think there's still the cultural roadblock that needs to be addressed. And again, I see no shortage of conversation. So that's encouraging as well, but that's going to take some time to bring cybersecurity as a culture within the OT space, but framed for the OT space. And then the last part of it, so you mentioned opportunities. But again, out of all this that I've seen, it is a greenfield area for a lot of us here. So there's still a lot of, I think, opportunity in the sense of there's still a lot of work, a lot of research to be done, and there's still a lot of ways to get things done appropriately. So I'm still encouraged at the end of all of that. I'm not discouraged by what I see. So, you're mentioning those artifacts. Out of those three things, I do see more unity, if you will. Not seeing kumbaya quite yet, but I do think we are, at least, albeit slowly, but I think we are going in the right direction.
I agree. And so Bill, as you said, Palo Alto as an example of a vendor, has a lot to bring to the security space, is known for enterprise and is moving into OT, into operational technologies and industrial technologies. Can I ask you the same sort of question? In moving that vendor into the space and getting resources that has to apply to it, if you have some comments on the roadblocks opportunities that you've seen and built in doing your part of building this great knowledge monster that we're all after.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as not so much an opportunity as something that has to come together. I mean, the different pieces of information that are being provided by different products. I mean, one just needs to kind of take a closer look at what happened with some of these advanced persistent threats, where it's almost well understood now that there are different distinct aspects of an advanced attack, where you have some kind of social engineering or the initial infectation of system, and then the payload drops, some kind of dropper is installed, and it propagates, kind of figuring out the topology and the assets and how things work. And then command and control is established, and finally the devious deed is completed. So there's these different elements, and if certain products can only detect certain pieces, if they're not talking to each other, it's going to be very hard to understand the nature of a threat. So it's imperative that industry comes together to learn how these things work and share what they're finding amongst each other. I mean, look at Stuxnet, right? That whether people threw USBs in the parking lot or somebody got spearphished as the initial attack, that's up for debate. But just, it's pretty clear that Stuxnet exploited some vulnerabilities in Systematic, several Windows ones. They used LNK and PIF files to propagate and the RPC application. So you can see these different pieces that were utilized. If things are not coming together, you'll just see these incidents as individual pieces, not necessarily correlated. So I think there's this, again, contextual unity that needs to be in place in industry. And we can only do that through efforts such as what we're doing here. Sorry, we have a fire alarm going off in our building right now. Can you guys still hear me? Sorry about that.
Yep, you've been hacked.
I suppose so, very much. Yeah, so going back to my comment, I think there's an opportunity, but I think it's more of a case that these things must happen. If you're gonna be attacked by an APT, it's gonna or a nation state, whatever, it's gonna happen. The key is to kind of detect it as quickly as possible, whether in the different stages of what we like to call the kill chain, whether it's in the initial stages or in the droppers loading. You can see these weird traffic profiles. So we definitely see more and more awareness in industry that these kinds of provisions need to be put in place, not only in their enterprise, but in the OT. I think the efforts being conducted by the ITS ISAC, regulations from NERC, NIST, all of these, there's a lot of activities now that are kind of educating industry and making them, start asking questions. How do we get this in place to curtail these advanced attacks?
Yeah, exactly. And so much of that, since we have two commercial solution providers on the panel today, this is, again, one of the issues that's got to be raised. And I don't know if I, said it in this iteration of describing SARA, but all of us together have to find ways to make it commercially viable for solution providers to have folks like you and the teams you need to be working on these things and doing the development. The litany of complaints about the vulnerabilities in the core industrial control system devices, for example. I mean, this has sort of been talked about over the last couple of years. Until customers ask for security in their products, there's no way to justify the staff. One vendor spends the money, puts the effort into it, hires security engineers, spends more time developing their code, and therefore raising their costs. They're just not going to be around to do it anymore. So I see, among the artifacts that we see in the environment around us, the Cisco and the Internet of Things, Mark, your success or lack of success in moving the ball forward with everything you know about this inside the corporate behemoth that is Cisco, how that evolves over the next couple of years. These are as important, in many cases more important, than specifically how we do things. I think it was you, Mark, that brought up basically the perfect is an enemy of the good. And the conversations we've had, both you and I and all of us, involved in this in the last year, I've seen, a lot of the recognition at this point, which I take as a positive sign, using map this to the information security space and the growth of the internet as a whole, sort of post 1990. And in those days, we were having the same conversations. What everyone needs to do is get firewall source code and personally review it line by line, and that's the only way to do it. That doesn't scale. And we have to have, two-factor or better yet, RNA scans, 17-factor, PKI cryptographic identity before anybody can perform a banking transaction online. So we've got a lot of lessons from all that we can map. Lessons both in technology and process, and in pragmatism. That the reality is that we're in a certain state, as we were back then, that we need to get to a state at some obvious point in the future. We can't be 10 years from now in the same state we are now. And even on a shorter scale, 3, 5, 7 years, things obviously have to be farther along. The information that we're seeing out there in the public realm on the state of attacks and the organization of nation states, as you mentioned, Dow, shows a clear roadmap to where the risk goes forward. We already know the consequence. So the steps we need to take end up being fairly mapped out. So I guess if there's a question embedded in that, I'd like to throw back to you, Mark, anyways. But so you guys are new into the Cisco body politic, body corporate. Any thoughts or commentary that you've seen in your getting to know the new family and engaging with that, and the influence of the Internet of Things and the awareness of the cyber-physical infrastructure issues on the Cisco corporate culture and marketing and perhaps activity in the product teams? Is there anything, observations to share on that level?
Sure. I'm just trying to think of how to frame this without sounding like a commercial. Cisco has what they call the IoT group, the Internet of Things group. So this is, the team that builds ruggedized hardware, industrial routers and switches, and so on. And why Cisco brought SourceFire in, I mean, obviously there are, the Cisco ASAs, I mean, there are security products, but I mean, SourceFire's got a pretty deep experience in there as well. And the folks, I mean, my job is to focus on ICS security. So obviously, I'm working with the IoT folks a lot, but the amount of interest that I've seen since I've come on, I mean, officially November 1, and just the amount of phone calls, emails, meeting requests I get from IoT and other industrial teams is pretty significant. So there is the value and the need recognized. I mean, I think when I talk to my own internal Cisco folks, the conversations are very similar that I have with other vendors and other practitioners. In that we all recognize that that there's a need, that there's threats out there. We know the threat is real. So what's been encouraging in why I guess you have the two of us on the phone, and you're seeing other vendors, that maybe weren't typically in the OT space making a move, is not only do we as practitioners understand the threats, but now we're seeing the organizations understand them. And you're seeing things like the PPD 21, the presidential directive. So it's now reaching up into government as well. So say what you will about regulation, but the fact that it's getting this kind of intention. But yeah, we are seeing that a lot internally. It's a very common topic. I mean, I guess because I live it every day. But yeah, there's quite a bit of effort. But now it's not so hard. As you know, the reality of doing anything commercially is you have to be able to justify the expenditure. And that argument is less and less difficult to have. It's actually more encouraging, and I'll leave it at that. That's what I can reveal at this point. But it's certainly, I don't have to do any convincing here. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but it's those indicators, that I find more interesting than threat indicators for a lot of other things. Because if we're going to solve this, we need big, huge machines to do it. We need the large government machines, we need the large corporate machines, to add to the, to add the fulcrum, I suppose, to a lever of the SAPs out there that have been using for a long time. And so a lot of your comments resonate. There's a journalist with us on the attendees right now, and Charlie, I owe you a call after this. But and so we're getting these sort of questions from the media and from various others. what are the effects of the voluntary working group, for example, that's like Phyllis Schneck is running under the Department of Homeland Security, and the cybersecurity framework and so forth. And it's easy to get lost in the details and say, well, this part or that part, I have issues with and so forth. That, again, shouldn't be surprising when you're engineering anything, wherever you are in the first draft. If you can get it working at all, that's wonderful, and if you learn lessons and don't do this and do that. But it's the fact that these things are out there is driving the conversation beyond the SME level, beyond the engineer level. That that we're seeing things like Lloyd's of London putting out a statement about these issues, about the cybersecurity framework, for example. Those are the sort of indicators that the C-suite inhabitants in industrial facilities, in manufacturing, in energy, and so forth take note of. My operations from a business perspective will be impacted by this, and they're very good at factoring in the indicators like noise coming from a national federal government that they have to be doing business in, with how long they have to get things done. So, when I'm asked questions like, what do I think about the framework? What do I think about the voluntary working group? I'm one of these folks that pay a lot of attention to this, and I can be critical of individual bits, but I tend not to be. That's not the point. We have to trust that all of us together, the society we're embedded in, and all of us, our peers, both in our particular vertical or horizontal space, as well as the people they work with, in their own demographic grids, are bright, are well-intentioned, are have an enlightened self-interest, and will work through these issues going forward. So will the NIST framework solve the world's problems? No. Is it absolutely perfect? No. And people involved would be the first ones to say that. But it's both a very good exercise, and it's a good table of contents into a lot of information that's out there, and that's needed. But it's also it's a highly visible move that gets beyond the individuals who would actually bother reading 853 or NERC standards and so forth, and get them to move. And these are exactly the same things we saw in the early internet, in the early InfoSec market. How do we get the 300, the Sparta cliche of this little group of folks who are working on this all the time, to map our interests and concerns and so forth into 300 million Americans and 6,000 electric utilities, 100,000 water, and so forth. So Dell or Mark, since that is, it is, we're having a conference, another webinar with the NIST leadership and some other individuals on the cybersecurity framework and voluntary working group and so forth. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but it is the elephant in the room. So either of you have comments on reactions to the NIST framework or specificity within it amongst your customer base? Are you seeing asset owners or others that are the kind of folks you can point your senior management to as potential clients, making significant moves based on the activity that's been coming out of the U.S. federal government?
Since I spoke last time, I'll let Del go first.
Yeah, sure. In polling some of my customers or people I talk to, asset owners, on their opinion of the framework, I think a lot of their comments is it kind of echoes a lot of the other good practices that have been implemented in other standards preceding it. So it's a good way, kind of way to, it's a good aggregation of a lot of the good practices out there. What's interesting for many of them is to kind of see that play out in several kind of collaborative efforts, more test-bed type of scenarios, use cases to see how they apply. I mean, for the most part, I think they're going to be using a lot of their existing frameworks, whether it's ISA 99 or some of the IEC-based guidance, or oil and gas, the API framework, whatever the industry may be. They already have some existing efforts. Kind of consolidating these into the NIST framework is a good thing. It's just a lot of people are kind of waiting to see more materialization of it. And it's not unexpected, still in early days, in my opinion, as well. So I'm sure it'll take more shape, but I think there's not too much critical mass that I'm seeing until there's that materialization in place, and whatever's been there is functional, it's implemented. But with that said, I think there's a lot of good practices in the NIST framework, and you should continue to follow it.
And Mark, since you've been globetrotting recently as well, I'm also interested in your, any observations you've had overseas, and anything you picked up in people outside the U.S. watching this particular process.
Sure. I mean, it kind of depends on the geography. So there are those that follow very closely what we do. Typically you see in Europe and Australia, there's quite a watchful eye on what comes out as standards. The NIST framework, I was hearing a little bit about, but not so much as that you would hear. I got to say though, just as an aside before coming back to the framework, within the ICS space, it's I think the first time from different sectors I've covered over the years, it really wasn't so geo-specific, which shocks me. So, you've seen kind of what my itinerary was like last year. And I mean, from Singapore to Bogota, there was the same concerns that in each place. The concerns around ICS are the same. There may be different regulatory views or approaches, but it was the first time I'd ever seen it. It was an actual universal issue. For the framework itself, I mean, I hear varied things. I mean, it's been a couple, well, I guess it was only just December that I read it, beginning of December around there. I still felt that it leaned more towards an IT bent than OT. But, I don't envy the NIST authors for having to put that together. I mean, you can't expect it to be perfect, and I think it was, a good step. Again, keep moving the ball forward as much as possible. But one of the things that I'm really hearing is kind of a subtext that's starting to concern some of the folks that I talk to in how the framework may be used, in terms of liability in cyber insurance. There's this idea or concept of commercial reasonableness. I think I have that right. Where, you have a standard that's out there, and even though it's not mandated, if your peers in an industry follow a given standard, but you don't, you're sub that standard and you have a problem, you could be found liable. I mean, we actually had a case in the financial world up here in New England a while back. There was a bank in Maine, had one of their, there's a local contractor, had their commercial account with this bank, had the account drained, and the account holder sued the bank because they didn't follow kind of commercial, again, I just always kill this, commercially reasonable standards, even though they weren't mandated to. So really the subtext that I hear around the framework is, okay, yeah, great, one thing to implement it from a technical perspective, or even a risk management perspective, but what is this going to mean for us from a liability and insurability perspective? And I'm kind of hearing more of that as well. I think that's where I'm hearing the biggest concern out of management.
Yeah, and again, that's the kind of chatter we want in the non-technical space. That gives us, reason to believe that that the customer space, looking from a commercial perspective, the asset owners, are having these conversations beyond the engineer realm, and the trickle down from that, will be either provide the resources to the engineering staff who want to do these things to push these things internally, or conversely, to require, engineering staff and others, who may have been, wanting to hold off from the kind of things that a lot of us, in the SME space would like to be done, to statistically start moving down that path. And we can only consume so much. One of the good things about, the evolution of any space, the adoption of technology, the evolution of the market, however you want to look at it, is that, everybody isn't going to come to Palo Alto and Cisco who really needs to do this stuff in the next 3 months. But the continuing ramp of organizations give us both the opportunity to perform enough case studies and use cases and so forth, so that solution providers like you folks, everybody behind you, and the service providers and so forth, can evolve their techniques. Dr. Cohen, who developed the identity program, for example, is the open source part of the identity part of SARA, and has been at this for 40 years. It's an exercise at great depth that has been used through the Burden Group and Gartner Group and various so forth. So that's been exercised to the point where we're getting the ability to establish the identity down to something that can be done relatively light. Will that, will we be able to go to these thousands and tens of thousands of organizations just here in the U.S. Alone, in the next 12, 24 months? No. But what we need to protect the nation as a whole, and the other nations, each of us, there's international people in this audience base, for example. The issues are the same, whether it's here or whether it's Norway or whether it's Finland or France or anywhere else. What we need is to go from the state we're at to a better state in a reasonable and effective period of time, where we have, with the whole Snowden backdrop that we're constantly and forever, faced with in the news cycle, we can see that, as a nation, we're doing a lot of information gathering in other spaces. At the same time, we're doing effectively none in infrastructure. So going from 0 to 1%, 2%, 3%, where we have 5 or 10% of facilities, both providing the opportunities for vendors and for others in the industry organizations and NIST and pick your actors to evolve their part of this process, and we get very, very tangible results, where we have a 1 to 10% saturation of knowledge coming back from facilities in the U.S., for example. It suddenly changes the model entirely for attackers. You don't have 100% likelihood of being away with it not being detected. You actually have quite a high chance of being caught. And as a nation, the ability to see that something happened in 5 different places in the country, and literally small numbers like that, changes our ability to defend ourselves exponentially. So the time is obviously right for this. Mark, as you said, just in the short period of time that the ITSI Act has been around, so we've seen all this conversation change completely. From 2 years ago, almost today, among a very elite group of individuals and organizations, to hear that utilities will not be sharing information. We've moved past that. So now we have that classic early engagement period where we need to infiltrate the space and provide where we can't get something done, we can work around that and come back to it. Where we can get something done, we have the opportunity to demonstrate, provide demonstrations that will replicate broadly. So we're in the last, let's say, 6 minutes of this call. I'd like to just get a brief closing comments from each of you, if anything else you want to throw out there, and do our handshake out. Any questions or comments from the live audience that somebody wants to throw out? We'll do the best to deal with them in the last minute or two. But Mark, since you've been starting the most, Del, if you have any brief thoughts to wrap with, feel free to talk them out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to kind of leave with a couple of guidance messages on kind of infrastructure security. I think I just want to leave with a couple messages that, number one, it's very important in the same way that we're trying to achieve situational awareness improvements. It's part of SARA that asset owners start today to get that going. It's not enough to look at traffic coming from the outside. You need to improve situational awareness also from within, knowing that a lot of the actual reasons for OT downtime is originating from incidents from within. So the first guidance is to learn as much as you can as far as how much what's available out there to make that happen. Make sure you have enough segmentation to get the visibility that's required. You know, not having a firewall at the perimeter of the OT is not sufficient. Again, going back to incidents happening from within, you need to have that added layer of granularity, whether it's in front of the data center, the control center, or in front of the substation protecting the field area, right? And you know, with this visibility, it's important to maybe at some point in time in the future we can elaborate, but you know, have some kind of provisions for a least privilege access model. You know, giving people just enough access to get that done. I think that's important to do as first steps before you when it comes to security, OT.
Pragmatism and defense in depth. Good thought. Mark, you want to leave us with additional words of wisdom if we have to pick all the ones you have in your head?
I say wisdom, you give me much credit. No, and I have to agree with Del. I mean, you know, the pragmatic approach, kind of what I was talking about being in a messy world, I agree wholeheartedly with, as well as the I'm a dyed-in-the-wool defense in depth kind of guy. So, you know, fully agree with Del on those points. And there's just actually one other thing I got so caught up that I forgot to mention when you were talking about artifacts of, you know, how ICS cybersecurity is being perceived. I forgot to mention, actually Andy Bachman worked on this. WPI, right here in my own backyard, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, actually now has an ICS security focus within their computer science curriculum. So I'm not aware, I don't know if there are other colleges doing that, but just to, you were talking about different artifacts, and that's one too, to show what kind of attention these concerns are getting. That actually, this is the first of my knowledge where we actually have a school that's got this as part of their curriculum. It's just important to note there. Yeah, the workforce development aspect of this, you know, is an enormous issue, and you're right. I think it's extremely rare to see, you know, academic institutions and colleges, you know, having specific focus on this. And it's been a topic, a lot of the topic of 2014. I think 2013. I think my last comment on this is that, you know, forecast for 2014 or 2015 is that we'll actually start making some progress there. And it's fascinating. You know, I hadn't heard that particular piece, Mark, because this is one of the things you're saying. We have to, in this period, in 2014, we have to start creating examples where there's training going on at the college level so we can develop the workforce we need, you know, 2, 3, 4 years from now. It doesn't exist today. A lot of conversation in 2013, you know, a lot of people have been brought from perhaps a standing start to at least walking down that path. So this is, as you say, another artifact to indicate where we're going with that. And that is as good a segue into kind of the closing comments as I could hope for. Thanks again to both you guys, everyone here who's live, everyone listening in the future. Thanks obviously to all our membership, you know, fantastic organizations doing very good work across the board. You can stay involved with the ICS ITAC by becoming a member. We're happy to have integrators, asset owners, industry organizations, public and private organizations involved. I can't begin to say how valuable the involvement of the individuals like Mark and Dal and your organizations and everybody else has been since our inception. We have these briefings typically every third Wednesday. We move this one to the fourth. We have another one coming up. We have a fantastic group
from Tripwire, from Cisco, from Oregon National Labs talking about interdependencies. We have a conference coming up at Georgia Tech in September, and it's specifically going to be a solutions-based educational conference where we'll be providing training, we'll be talking about what can be done going forward. And of course, we can be reached by email and all sorts of other electronic means. So, Debbie, we have hit the top of our hour. If you would hit the room, and thank you very much, and I will close with that.
To our distinguished panelists, thank you both so much for your thoughts and insights you've shared on today's call. And to our audience, on behalf of all of us at the ICS ISAC, we appreciate your joining us today. We hope that you found the information of value and something that you can take and implement to further secure your industrial control systems. Our next public briefing will be held Wednesday, February 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern and feature a panel of distinguished subject matter experts presenting Cyber Everywhere, the emerging threat of the Internet of Things. Other sessions will be announced in our monthly updates, on the Center's website, and in our other communication vehicles. Thank you again for your participation on today's call.